So we had a few slides that we were going to share with you, which expands on this a bit further. And so I will just make sure that you can see these. Let me just share again. Share screen. Where are they? There it is. Yeah. Try and do this without my reading glasses. So, slightly. There we go. So, do you want to?
Yeah.
Advance.
Yes, just a few observations, because we would like to listen to you, to your opinions and what you saw. I think that the film, in the film, you will see some challenges, and in regard to the logistics, if you pay attention on the logistics, it's a very isolated area. And in regard also to the process of production, there is...
Fala deles, aparece eles perguntando, entendeu? Só lá as falas deles e imagens da comunidade, entendeu?
Coming from the process of production, and there are some studies to recycle these residues. They have problems with energy. They still have lack of energy, which comes from the city of Carauari, and the city is very far. And you saw in the film that they have solar systems, but not enough for all the communities, and including the industry, the agro-industry, which is in the forest, is not it's not run with solar, with those solar systems.
Objetivos da Índia e da Maru.
Energy that comes from Carauari, and sometimes it falls down, and they need to use oil. Yes, and this, of course, this is not the best option. And also they are looking for autonomy in regard of financial and economic issues. They are very supported by NGOs, and now they are being supported by an important group called Partners for the Amazon, which is called PPA. They are included in a project called Território do Médio Juruá, Medio Juruá Territory #2, which with the focus on enhancing cooperativism and social biodiversity supply chains in the area. This project is run by a social investment fund called Citaui, Finance for Good, Citaui Finanças do Bem. And they have all this challenge to be more and more autonomous. Here we have this characteristics of the area and the objectives of the oil production chain, which is improving quality of life, promoting productive chains of biodiversity and value for these communities, community organizing traditional riverine and indigenous people, and implementing conservation unit policies in the area. Of course, generating income for the people and maintaining the forest up. Do you want to? Yes, this is a very, very short explanation of the process of production, which is divided in 6 stages. The first stage is seed collection, and as you saw, it's done mostly by women. In this case, women they look like a way of earning more money, of course, as you saw this lady when she was telling this, but also it's a moment of they gather all together to talk about their families, to have fun, and to this is very cultural, linked to the community, especially
inglês que eu tô tentando entender, tu tá botando coisa alta aí.
To leave their children, and then they are afraid of, not afraid of the things that we are afraid in urban areas, but afraid of the animals, and it's always a problem. And the second phase is seed transportation, and you saw that this could be still a bottleneck because it's still done by men, and they carry the heavy sacks. the heavy load with seeds, and considering they are isolated in the forest, they use a lot of transport with big boats, and the boats are also run with oil. And this is something that should be explored and more understood by universities, by researchers, how to transform this logistics in a way that it's sustainable and also not so problematic for the people and the men in the communities. And then we have prior storage to oil processing, seeds drying. The storage is already in the agro industry, and then the seeds dry, you saw a little bit in the process. You have the seed pressing and oil filtering. There are little bottlenecks in this process as well, good for the engineers and because they need a more quality in this oil. The oil is still a little bit acid, and considering this aspect, it's more directed to sabões, to the thing that we use to wash our
the shower stuff.
Shower stuff, exactly. But they are studying how to overcome this, and they are improving. New machines are arriving, and in the end, we have the filling process and delivery to customers. They are able to do this and very efficient, and they deliver sometimes to other states in Brazil by boat and by truck, and they take care of all this final phase.
So we can this is just some images of that process. So basically some nice quotes from the film. So when we go into the forest, we don't know where the tree is yet, we'll go searching so we can collect. So this is an example. This is
the muru seed. Yeah.
The last time I was there with
Hello.
the NGO to try and help them
Oi,
chain costs. So one of the things that that they've been break down, what is the cost at every level, and what does that mean for investment, and where and what are the costs of the particular stages, and what does that mean for the price at the end. So often if a supplier says I want to pay X amount, you need to be able to break it right down. So they've been doing a lot of work on actually working out the individual steps of the entire supply chain and the costs of each of the processes, how much labor is involved and things like that, which we have some interesting kind of supply chain diagrams that are emerging that we won't show you today because I'm sure you don't want to see those as well. But that's quite fascinating to see the actual minutiae of the different stages. Obviously, these are the pictures of the transportation stages and some of the challenges that would be involved, but particularly see obviously a huge amount of human labour involved in this. The contracts are run through the community, so they're not with individuals, they're community level contracts, and these are community level organisations and enterprises facilitated by the various NGOs in the region. And that isn't that the boat that I was on?
Yeah, it's similar, yeah.
So that's the Asprocky boat that they deliver a lot of these things on. This is obviously the pictures of the drying. So these are on the land areas within the community that they do this. And there's the storage area there on the left. So notice the facilities, the communities have built these new storage areas. I hadn't actually seen this one because that wasn't there when I was there last time at that level. Mm-hmm. They've also invested quite a lot in new equipment since I was there. So it's really nice to see how well developed this is becoming. It's becoming incredibly professionalized. So you can see some images there of the different equipment that they do for the drying. And then you saw some of this from the film.
This is the residual.
Yeah, so this brown stuff is that waste residual that they're trying to find a market for and what they can do with it. So there's a lot of areas of kind of knowledge and exploration that the community has of things that they want to know, what could we do with this? How might we improve this better? So there's really a call out to those that are listening and the networks who are, you know, people that are ecologists and engineers and all sorts of different people, rather than just the social scientists that Silvia and I are, to work with the communities to think about innovative new products and processes that might emerge from this. This is the delivery, and bear in mind that, you know, this is a classic example of the delivery there. You've got the containers on the back of the boat being sailed up the river. There's a particular very large multinational company that they deliver to. We won't name them, but it's a global company, and they sail up the river with the delivery load to the docking facilities at the site to drop these off. So it kind of goes straight up there. So and they're obviously the pallets ready to go for the large scale deliveries that they have. So these were some of the highlighted points that we wanted to pick up on. Do you want to?
Yes, I think that they now they are in this thinking on a brand, on a collective brand, and also they need to think more in logistics and adding a value to the final product, and more than this, to distribute this value. I know that this is an issue in your classes, and it's very important to think on this, because they need visibility. They think they don't have enough visibility for their work because they are providers of a service environmental. We have to stress the point that they are in reserves. They are limited by laws. They can't scale. They have to do this in a sustainable way, and they're doing in a sustainable way, and they pay a price for that. They have a cost because they are doing all of this production in a sustainable management way. This is the right name of the process they use. And I think that there is a lot of work to do in discussing this value, discussing a value, discussing a brand, discussing governance. This is something that we should highlight positively, because if they are where they are and different from other communities in the Amazon, is because they have a very interesting governance scheme, where the community-based enterprises have a lot of voice and the leaders have a lot of voice. They decide ultimately. And women, as you saw, they are requiring more empowerment because they are the majority of the workers in the cooperative, but they are not visible as well, and they need to be more together. And in the end, the problem that all of us have to think, which is the climate change affecting. The climate change affected the oil seed, but in the fishing case, it was good. So it's something that we need to think, because at the same time, like this man said, that the seeds were owned with the river, because the river can flow more than 14 meters sometimes. And the fishes came, so it's contradictory, and a lot of things to research and to understand.
So we hope that gives you a short flavour of the area that we've been looking at. One of the things that came out of the original grant that Silvia and I had was this notion of a different view of the Amazon. Now, obviously, there are incredible environmental issues going on in the Amazon at the moment, but there is also some really interesting stories about these community-based enterprises and a kind of slightly different way of looking at some of the things that are happening there. So we thought the films are really designed to show these community-based enterprises and the kinds of activities they're doing, and the really critical role that they play in being stewards of these areas. And as Silvia said, they work to various rules, they work within the governance structures of the organisations, and they do feel, I think, sometimes that they're not really recognised, that they're not really seen. And so we're hoping that eventually, when the 3 films are finished, as a package of films, they should really kind of shine a bit more of a spotlight on these particular groups. we're not obviously downplaying a lot of the issues that there are, but we also want to focus in on, you know, how do the supply chains work? What do they do? Where is value being created? Okay, so that's the end of our slides, and we wanted to ask if you had any comments, any questions. Now, as we said, there's a bit of an issue with the volume between us. So if you want to pop anything in the chat, I'm going to stop the share and I'm going to go back to the main screen. And then if you want to put anything in the chat, and if you want to speak it at the same time so that everybody can hear you in the virtual world. Before we turn to the virtual, is there anyone in the room that had a question? Was there anything that you guys wanted to ask? I'm putting this, there's four students in the room here from various levels, and we're putting them on the spot to see if they had any questions. Did anybody have anything they wanted to say? You don't have to if you don't want to. It's like being in one of my seminars. Talk now.
I think she wants to.
I major in fashion, actually, and I think this project is quite interesting. I noticed that the seed collection process almost, but the delivery and the transaction process all by men almost. I think this situation is a real our life. I don't still have some same situation in China. Actually, it's quite interesting.
Thank you. Did you hear that, you guys in the room? Diogo, did you hear the comment from the room? Put your thumb up if you did. All right. So the comment was around the gender roles that there are between the majority of the women being involved in the collection and men being involved in the delivery, and the comment in the room about how that plays out in other industries, particularly, you know, maybe in places like China. Yeah, I think that's one of the things that comes out is the genderized roles within the different parts of the supply chain, which bring with them the various, you know, perhaps some different issues and things like this. So that was one of the comments on the room. No, there's anything else? Yeah.
Can anything be done for the childcare? Because all the women are worried about their kids.
Okay. So the question there is about the childcare aspect. Questions of whether anything could be done to kind of manage the childcare better. I don't know, Silvia, what do you think? What might they do?
Yes, this poses the questions of responsibilities of cooperation. Because if they sell to one or two or to the cosmetic sector, maybe this could be like negotiated or talked or discussed along the supply chain, considering this is a need for these women. But I think that based on what they say, they are so like they need more voice. Maybe they didn't have the courage to say, maybe they didn't pose this question to the company or to the managers, or feeling that this is real, this is a real problem. The women, the association of the women's association that you saw there, it exists for a long time, but they were a lot hidden, and their problems are still very overcome. It's not like they are not considered very well. I think that now they're starting to pose their questions, and maybe this is something that could be better discussed, a small NGO or association that may take care of these kids and trying to get some resources or grants in calls to build the type of school or caring for these kids. I think that there will be solutions. Yeah.
I mean, I think the fact that these organizations have a very strong cooperative structure, those lend itself to kind of collective childcare arrangements and things like that. So I think those kinds of solutions will need to emerge from within the community.
Mm-hmm.
And perhaps the fact that women are getting a greater voice means that these issues will move up the priority list of the things that are being talked about. You know, when I was there the first time, they were delivering some boats to the community members, and in each of the kind of different communities that were at the producer meeting were getting a boat. So they were all attached to the big boat as we sailed along, weren't they? And they were given those boats. And so as a group, they had decided that that was what they wanted some investment to go into. So I think as, you know, things progress, maybe we will see that. Okay, so we have a question in the chat. It says, is part of the project to investigate the relation between climate change and the value supply chain in the Amazon? Well, it wasn't kind of originally, was it?
No, it wasn't. But in this trip, because of the recent flood, this called a lot our attention, because they were always telling this the same story, that they lose the seeds, and this was because of the climate change, and this is something that now appeared because of our trip in October.
Yeah, so the original focus was really to break down the level, you know, what was happening in the supply chains, because on our previous visits in the first project, we'd realized quite how complex it was, and how the different elements of producing what looked like quite a simple product, some oil, actually had quite complex aspects. And so, yeah, that was the original focus. But I think as the discussions in the interviews and things have gone along, the various events have kind of come to the fore. So there's a question there. It says, when you speak about these communities and organizations being seen more, by whom, i.e. the companies they're selling to or the Brazilian government? Well, it was, so, I mean, the community members themselves talk about how they're hidden, don't they? They talk about how they don't feel like that what they do is really understood and recognized. And so the idea behind the films was to move beyond the very narrow silo of a journal article and, you know, even a book chapter, and to do something that people are more likely to watch. And so that's why we kind of went for very high quality, professionally produced films that hopefully, which will be free access and will be hosted, and as obviously you see, in multiple languages. And there'll be some, you know, reports and things around those, but those will be freely available on a whole series of repositories, including YouTube. So that's our hope, is that they'll go be spread around that way. So, and obviously the community members themselves, so they sign off on the films before they're released. So none of the films will be released until the communities involved have approved the films, and then they're obviously, they'll be their films then, and they'll be able to do with them what they want as well. So that was the whole point of kind of pulling them together in this way.
Yeah.
Was there any, another question? Any more questions from the audience? Yeah.
I saw this video. After this, I understand these local people definitely need some help, maybe from the social organization or maybe from the government. But I want to know what they truly desire. Is the money, process machine, or the stable job, or just the money for the higher quality of the life? I want to know what's their truly desired things.
Okay, so the question in the room is looking at the different aspects of what they're after in the communities. What is it that they truly want? What is the kind of priority that we see in terms of what they ask for, in terms of help that they might need help with? Sylvia?
I think that the priority is not the money, because as we know, they have lots of social investment funds and corporations that felt that they work well, they do well, they know how to work, they are well organized, and these corporations and these groups, they are happy to invest there because they know that they will have back their brand names, or if there is a commercial relation, they will commit with the relation. So the question is not money. Of course, they need income generation because this is an activity that is developed only 3 months of the year, and they do other things along the 12 months. Because of course this is a lot linked to the climate, to the river, tide, and so on. But what they need, what they want, is the preservation of the forest, because they are a lot afraid with the fact that if the conservation unit the system doesn't work, it's a public policy that the government just gave them the land. So you have the collective use of this land, but the government's not helping in any other thing. Small things, small policies which are not stable during the long time. And if they lose the land, they will be lost. So they need to preserve the forest, doing these things to generate income at the same time, and they want to be valued for that because they know the value of this. They are a lot aware of this value of doing economic activities, generating income, and preserving the forest. And they want people to know that they are able to do this, despite government is not looking at them. The corporation is looking at them. They have a good relationship with the companies, but they need to be visible to the market because they aim to sell directly to the market. They aim to diversify markets. They aim to sell to different corporations, to different companies. They aim to add value in the product and sell direct to the consumers. So this is what they want because they want to be there. They don't want to go out of the forest. They live there. They're happy there, and they want to have more structure like education, better education, of course, health, which is not there. All these things that the government should be doing, and they need to go after alone.
So another question in the chat is, it says, in the film, they talk about wanting access to trade directly with business and cut out the middleman. How does that happen? And how do we get the better visibility in the market? And also a comment around, is it an international cosmetic brand that buys the oil? So yeah, so from the oil supply chain, the oil value chain at the moment, it's predominantly sold to a major set of suppliers that are large multinational cosmetics companies who use the oil in specific products. So yeah, they want to continue with that, but also diversify the income stream into other areas where they might sell directly. You know, if people don't know that they're there, then obviously it's very difficult. And also the logistics of how you reach them to get these products. You know, this is an incredibly difficult place to get to. You don't just rock up and say, oh, I'd like to buy a bottle of oil, please. So there needs to, at the moment, there are middlemen as such, or middle people, but it's traditionally men who kind of act as the facilitators into various markets. Obviously, they want to capture more of that value within the community. And it's just a question of how do they do that? And part of the idea, I think, of building the brand is to do that, is to give themselves more of a visual identity via the brand. And that will then, you know, diversify the product portfolio. And you've got in the other value chains, for instance, the fish, you've got different routes to market, so to speak. You have some where they sail down to Manaus and they sell directly in the wholesale markets. There's others where they supply on to a wholesaler or to a third party. So we see a bit more of that in the other films. So yeah, overall, I think one of the biggest things they want is better visibility in terms of their value chains, their supply chains, and their link to customers, and then diversify that customer base a bit more. Is there any more questions from the or any comments
from our students?
Oh, yeah. Right. I'm gonna listen to the question, then tell you what they said. Yeah.
Yes, you know when the seeds were crushed up and you've got like the byproduct of it, and you're trying to find something else to do with that. Is there anyone who is starting to look at that so they can get value from that? Right.
So the questions around when the seeds were being crushed, the waste residual material. Is there anybody that's looking at how they might create value to that? Well, part of the original project was that we were going to try and bring people into these communities who had different expertise in different areas from outside of the Amazon as a way to help facilitate that discussion. Because of COVID, that really hasn't happened, and we're not sure that kind of thing can happen by us in the remaining timeline. Certainly not from my side of the grant, because that finishes in about 3 days' time. But the Brazilian side, you know, perhaps we might be able to, but some of that again is, you know, we hope that the films might generate interest that then leads to other people saying, oh, do you know, I'd like to have a look at that. So that is hopefully one of the outcomes we'd like to see happen, is that people will then reach out. So there's a question there, how do they build their networks? What about their social capital? How do they build their networks?
Oh, they have a very interesting story. They were a lot supported by the Catholic Church during the 80s, the end of the 70s to the 80s, while they were totally abandoned in this area and conflict with many people, different groups. There was a part of the Catholic Church at that time that supported them a lot, and this was part of a group called Base Education and Movement. So they start to teach them how to write, how to read, and start to teach them based on their traditions. So it was a lot rooted in their traditions, and more than this, they teach them how important it is to be associated, to be working as a group. So this is so important to them. And just to add in your question, the last question, I've heard when I was there that they are like researching to use this residue to feed other animals. So it's something that they are starting to study, and they were like trying to receive resources or applying in calls or doing partnerships with local universities to understand if this is possible.
Yeah, I think it's important to note as well, when you go into Karawi, how many NGOs are based there, and that there is a really strong network, and the same is true in Manaus. A really strong network of NGOs that all work together, who work with the communities. So there's a kind of really strong kind of underpinning set of networks that that have this social capital, that share access to knowledge, they share, you know, or facilitate access to financial resources. And so there is a richness there that I think is sometimes underestimated about the kind of networks and kinship ties that exist between these communities. And, you know, within a reserve, each area is not a kind of self-contained town. There's lots of exchange of, you know, marriage and all sorts of different things. So there are a much wider kind of network of perhaps more informal networks as well that are not so easily captured. Do we have any more questions on the chat? We're coming close to time now. It's 6:15. So I think, is there any last questions in the room? Yeah, Sam?
Yeah. Just looking into the long term, how would they preserve the environment so that stuff, the floods and etc., doesn't keep affecting their business?
So the question is, in the long term, how are they going to preserve the environment so things like floods and stuff won't impact them? I don't know, I suppose that's $1 million question, isn't it?
During one of our interviews, you saw this man. He is a manager of the RDS, which is the Sustainable Development Reserve. And he told us, that is not in this film, it will be in the longer one. He told us that they should be more prepared. They should have more resources in cash, and also resources in material more protected. They should think about, during these times of flooding, to change things from certain places, especially when they are very close to the river. They should, of course, they never had time to think about all this situation, and climate change is like, the effects are every year worse, but now is an issue. Now it is a real issue. And yes, together with the issue of invasions and all these things. So you have to assume that they have a very important task, and that's why they feel that they are not valued.
So you had a quick question?
Yeah, in which way would you say that politics affects these communities? And for instance,
So the question is around, to what extent do politics impact the reserves, and will the sustainable development reserves stay the same if the government changes?
They consider themselves like a loan. They did all their efforts to build these reserves, and this was something that they it was conquested by themselves with a lot of fight. And since this time, they are alone. But of course, presently we have a moment of a very complicated moment in Brazil in regard to politics, and the attempts to change the system of conservation units is a threat. Of course it is. If they say, no, we're going to change now, you can do this and these things in the reserves, you're going to disconsider all your management plan, and tomorrow, this is happening. So they need the fact that they are part of a strong network, including big NGOs, small NGOs, important local associations in the area, with the governments. This has been very important for them. And the fact that they have economic activities there. So, but it's of course, it's not stable. It's problematic, yeah.
Okay, I'm going to call it to a close there. So we would like to thank you all for attending, and thank you for your questions. I'm sure there are lots more that you could ask us, but I'm also sure that you are, you know, ready to go home, some of you. But we wanted to acknowledge the funders as well of this work. So obviously from the UK side, it's the Newton Fund, and from the Brazilian side, it's FAPIAM, which is the particular funding council for that side of it. And obviously we are very sad that the other partners in the project are not physically here as well, and that we can't really hear everybody so well on the online. So we also wanted to recognise the important role that the different institutions that host our project play. Obviously my own institution in Leeds, and particularly UFAM, who play obviously who run the project from the Brazilian side. And obviously thank you to Silvia's institution for letting her be involved. So we hope you enjoyed it, and we will send you the copy of the final film when it's all completed. We're really pleased with it so far, and we're hoping that we will eventually be able to have a really good kind of hours worth of really interesting footage for you. So thank you very much, and we wish you all farewell, and we will have a link for the recording that we will obviously send out to you as well. So thanks very much.
Thank you.